Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really diving into something critical, truly global, these ongoing talks for a binding treaty on plastic pollution. It feels, for our generation, maybe a bit like the Paris Agreement moment, but, specifically for plastics. And right now, literally, as we're talking, there's a huge global summit happening in Geneva. Over 100 countries are there trying to hammer out what could be a landmark deal. The scale of it, well, it's pretty remarkable. So, our mission here is to unpack the key positions, the different forces at play, and really the science driving this whole debate. We want to give you a clear shortcut to understanding why it matters so much. Okay, let's get into it.
And the urgency, well, it couldn't be clearer, could it? There was that recent Lancet report, a really stark warning. It basically said microplastic exposure isn't just some vague environmental issue. It poses serious health risks to humans at all stages of life.
Wow. So it's not just turtles and oceans, it's actually us.
Exactly. We're talking microplastics found in our blood, in vital organs, potential hormone disruption, inflammation. It's getting personal. These materials are, literally becoming part of our biology. That's the core urgency driving these talks.
Okay. And right away, you see this fundamental split, don't you, over how to fix it. Different countries pushing different ways. Hints of deep national interests, I imagine. Here's where it gets really interesting. Can you maybe lay out the specific proposals? What are the main camps saying?
Absolutely. So on one side, you've got nations, blocs like the European Union, really pushing for what they term a circular economy approach. Their core idea, slash plastic production, right at the source. They want strict recycling targets and, importantly, outright bans on certain harmful products, especially those single-use plastics we see everywhere.
Okay, so cut it off at the tap, basically.
Pretty much. They argue the sheer volume of plastic flowing out is just unsustainable. Environmentally, yes, but also economically. These binding limits they're pushing for, it's not just about saving the planet, it's also about creating a level playing field for industries that are actually investing in sustainable alternatives.
Right.
So they're not undercut by cheap new plastic.
Right, that makes sense. A clear, comprehensive plan focused on reduction from the get-go. But then, what's the other side of the coin? What are the counter-arguments, especially from, say, countries whose economies rely heavily on making this stuff?
Yeah, and that's the real friction point, the main tension. You have oil-rich countries, think Saudi Arabia, Russia, Iran, whose economies are deeply, deeply tied to fossil fuels.
Which is what plastic is made from, of course.
Exactly. Fossil fuels are the primary feedstock. So they push back hard against binding production caps. Their argument is, look, plastic is essential. It's versatile. It's vital for economic development, medical tech, construction, everything.
Yeah.
So they contend the focus shouldn't be on limiting production, but rather on better waste management, improving recycling, developing new cleanup tech.
To manage the waste better, don't restrict the source?
Precisely. And crucially, they strongly prefer voluntary agreements.
Voluntary, meaning less teeth.
What it means more flexibility for their own national policies, less disruption to their current economic models, less international oversight, potentially.
It's easy to see this as just some distant UN meeting in Geneva. But then you see those pictures, right? Beaches just choked with plastic bottles and bags. Or you read that Lancet report, and suddenly it feels very real, very close to home.
Beyond the economics and the direct health warnings, what other science really hammers home why we need some kind of global treaty, regardless of the final details? So the sheer scale is just mind-boggling. We produce hundreds of millions of tons of plastic every single year, and so much of it, just vast quantities, ends up where it shouldn't. Oceans, landfills, even really remote places.
Like the Arctic, I've read.
Exactly. Scientists find microplastics deep in ocean trenches, frozen in Arctic ice, basically everywhere they look, not just in fish, but in the water, the sediment. This widespread presence, it messes with ecosystems, hits biodiversity hard, and there's the long-term chemical load on the planet to consider. Plus, the stuff just doesn't go away. It persists. It breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, but it doesn't truly biodegrade for centuries, if ever.
So the problem just keeps getting worse over time.
It compounds, yeah.
Okay, so given these really stark differences in approach cut production versus manage waste and this undeniable environmental need, what are the main sticking points right now in Geneva? What are they actually arguing about minute to minute?
Well, it gets quite technical, as you'd expect. A key issue is just defining what plastic pollution even means for the treaty. What exactly is covered? Then there's how you measure and monitor compliance. That's huge. How do you make sure countries are actually doing what they promise?
Especially if some prefer voluntary measures.
Right. And that leads to the biggest question. The legal nature of the agreement itself. Is it genuinely binding? Will there be enforcement? Or is it more like a framework suggesting national actions?
So it's still very much a battle between those two core philosophies, binding limits versus voluntary management.
Largely, yes. But you do see some potential middle ground emerging, often from developing nations. They recognize the urgency, but they also worry about being hit too hard by strict rules without support.
So they might be looking for compromises.
Exactly. Things like mechanisms for technology transfer, maybe financial aid for building better waste infrastructure,
Yeah.
trying to bridge that gap between controlling production and handling the waste at the end. But yeah, if you zoom out, the fundamental tension remains, that push from the EU and others for binding limits phasing out single-use plastics, versus the counter from oil-rich nations saying, let's keep it voluntary, focus on managing the waste. That's the heart of it.
So what does this all mean for you listening? When you think about how far plastic pollution reaches, literally everywhere, and especially those serious health warnings from Lancet about microplastics getting inside us, just imagine, how will the final version of this global treaty, whether it sets hard limits or relies more on voluntary promises, how will that shape everything? Environmental policy, sure, but also the products you buy, maybe even public health outcomes for years, maybe generations to come. It's something that's going to affect all of us long after these negotiations wrap up. Definitely something to keep thinking about.